The last total solar eclipse in our area occurred on June 16, 1806, and it's sometimes dubbed Tecumseh's eclipse. The reason for that nickname will be in another video. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between Earth and the sun, thereby totally or partly obscuring the image of the sun for a viewer on Earth. John Cochran and his young wife arrived in well-forested Stowe Township during the spring of 1806. They boarded with the Wetmore family while John was building their new home at the north end of Crystal Lake, where the Silver Lake Country Club is today. On the morning of June 16, 1806, Mrs. Cochran was at home with the Wetmores doing chores, when just after 9:30 in the morning, it began to grow dark. Glancing outside and not seeing a storm, she began to get concerned. Mrs. Cochran became increasingly scared as it grew darker. Eventually, she fell on her knees, shouting that the world was coming to an end, and she began praying. The more worldly Anna Wetmore tried to explain that it was just an eclipse, but Mrs. Cochran's cries began scaring the Wetmore children, so she ran outside to get William. William Wetmore had a difficult time trying to pacify her. He found his piece of smoked glass and watched as the moon slowly slid in front of the sun. He handed the glass to Mrs. Cochran and explained that it was simply an eclipse and taught her the mechanics of an eclipse. He asked her to go ahead and look through the glass to see the moon move in front of the sun. She watched as it grew darker outside until it became completely pitch black from 11:15 to 11:20. As it became lighter outside, she laughed along with the others and apologized for acting like a foolish woman. Meanwhile, John Cochran was over at the new cabin cutting out a doorway. The surrounding forest grew darker and darker. Owls started hooting and the chickens went to roost. The wolves began to howl furiously and the other animals of the night began moving about. John became so alarmed that he climbed to the roof beam at the topmost point of the new log cabin, where he waited the longest 5 minutes of his life before the sky began growing light again. He climbed down and hightailed it past Crystal Lake and around the east shore of Silver Lake to the Wetmore home to find out what had just happened. Everyone was amazed by what had happened, and the topic dominated the noon dinner hour. By 12:44, everything appeared completely normal once again. As mentioned earlier, the Cochrans and Wetmores lived in the forests of Stowe Township with only a small handful of white settlers. However, their friends, the Seneca Indians, along with their chief, Wagmung, had homes along the shore of Silver Lake and the western side of the Cuyahoga River. They too were frightened, and they were certain the Great Spirit was coming and the world was coming to an end. When daylight returned and the earth was still under their feet, they celebrated with dance and a feast. The next eclipse in this area falls on April 8, 2024. A lot has changed in the last 218 years. Everyone is aware of what is going to happen except perhaps the uncontacted tribes of indigenous people. If you miss the April eclipse, never fear. There's another one here on September 14, 2099.